While we're on the subject of actresses and awards and hacks, do we have a moment for Rachel Zegler and Snow White? Because there is an update.
Disney's collapse didn't begin with a bad weekend at the box office. It began the moment Snow White was shown to test audiences. What should have been a triumphant remake of one of Disney's most iconic classics turned into a slow-motion disaster. Early feedback wasn't just negative, it was humiliating. Viewers described the film as cold, directionless, and completely disconnected from the magic that made the original special. Scenes felt stitched together. The tone flipped wildly, and instead of enchantment, fans got what they called a lecture in disguise. According to leaked internal screening notes, executives were stunned by how many people used the word unwatchable. Some walked out halfway through. That reaction alone sent shockwaves through Disney headquarters, but they had no idea how bad it was about to get. Within days, backlash exploded online. Clips of Rachel Zegler dismissing the original Snow White as outdated and weird resurfaced and went viral. Fans accused her of disrespecting the legacy of Walt Disney himself. When asked about Prince Charming, she said, "She doesn't need him." That line became a meme overnight, and not the good kind. TikTok, Reddit, and YouTube were flooded with angry breakdowns, parodies, and callouts.
There was an in-depth piece, like a behind-the-scenes piece. Was it Variety? Talking about how they've been in a full meltdown about this girl for a couple of years now.
Disney's fan base wasn't just upset. They felt betrayed. These weren't random trolls. These were lifelong Disney loyalists. Parents, collectors, even cast members at theme parks. People who'd stood by the brand for years. Now they were calling for boycotts. And the worst part? The movie hadn't even been released yet. All of this happened before opening day. What should have been a fairy tale comeback had turned into a public relations wildfire. Disney tried to spin it. They put out statements praising the film's bold new vision. They pushed Zegler forward to defend it, believing her passion would win audiences over. But it backfired. Every new interview she gave poured more fuel on the fire. Fans said she was arrogant, dismissive, out of touch. And as the anger mounted, rumors began to swirl. Claims of on-set drama, emotional breakdowns, even allegations she'd been temporarily detained after an incident with press. No hard evidence ever confirmed it, but at that point, it didn't matter. The internet had chosen its narrative, and Disney was no longer in control of it. Behind the scenes, panic set in. Executives began holding emergency meetings. Internal reports show multiple departments were pulled from other projects to help contain the Snow White fallout. Marketing teams scrubbed trailers, reshoot budgets were slashed. Calls to shut the film down entirely were seriously considered, but it was too late. Contracts had been signed, money had been spent, and the only path left was forward.
There were reportedly not even going to be dwarfs either. Rainbow people instead. I thought it was a fan protest. And even the word dwarfs isn't mentioned in this remake. The film has people saying, don't mock sleepy as a neurological condition. And dopey isn't really dopey, that'd be rude.
Straight into disaster. The moment Snow White hit theaters, the fallout reached full speed. Box office numbers dropped like a stone. What was projected to be a $150 million opener barely cracked $40 million in its first weekend. International markets, which usually help soften domestic flops, turned their backs too. Countries that had once welcomed Disney blockbusters with open arms saw Snow White pulled from cinemas within days. In some regions, theaters dropped it completely after night one due to low attendance. Financial analysts reviewing Disney's quarterly filings confirmed the studio had taken a 9-figure loss, over $100 million gone, fast. And this wasn't just a bad financial call, it was a brand killer. Projects were killed in real time. Hercules, Moana, Tangled, Princess and the Frog, all halted. Contracts with writers and production teams were either terminated or placed in legal suspension. Studios that had already been location scouting and building early sets were ordered to stop operations immediately. Some creatives were informed via email that their projects were no longer moving forward. No calls, no explanations, just silence. Lawsuits are now quietly brewing behind the scenes. Several production companies have filed breach of contract notices, and some talent agencies are already in talks with legal teams over lost opportunities and income. This was a full system shutdown.
Peter Dinklage questioned why the story even included the characters at all.
They're very proud to cast a Latino actress as Snow White.
Yeah.
but you're still telling the story of Snow White,
yeah.
and Seven Dwarfs.
Sure.
So, take a step back and look at what you're doing.
Bob Iger, once hailed as the architect of Disney's live-action empire, was forced to step in publicly. He tried to calm investors with promises of a new creative direction and refocusing on core values, but the damage was done. During a tense earnings call, Iger confirmed that Disney would no longer move forward with any live-action adaptations of its classic animated films. For now. That phrase, "for now," was the only sliver of uncertainty left, but everyone listening knew the message was clear. This was a retreat. Meanwhile, inside Disney's own walls, morale collapsed. Staff from Walt Disney Studios, Disney Plus, and Disney Imagineering started leaking frustration anonymously through trade interviews and verified forums. Some blamed poor leadership, others pointed fingers at rushed production schedules, conflicting creative visions, and corporate interference. Multiple staff claimed Snow White went through 3 different endings before settling on one that pleased no one. One editor involved in the project posted anonymously that they were asked to remove magic in favor of messaging. It was no longer about telling a story, it was about delivering a statement. And that's when the fan revolt turned nuclear. Die-hard Disney loyalists started deep diving into every decision made behind Snow White. From casting to writing to PR, fans pieced together a timeline that exposed how far the studio had veered off course. YouTube channels with millions of subscribers broke it down frame by frame. Former cast members began speaking out, carefully but clearly. Even mainstream entertainment journalists who once praised every Disney release started using words like,
"You actually just erased the dwarfism side of it, the disability, like we're a disability group, you just erase that whole image."
Soulless, cynical, and irreparable. Snow White didn't just miss the mark. It triggered a total identity crisis. The studio that once prided itself on wonder and heart had alienated its most loyal audience. For the first time in Disney's modern era, nostalgia had failed to save them. As the dust settled, Disney faced a terrifying new reality. Its magic wasn't bulletproof anymore. The company that built its empire on fairy tales and childhood dreams was now grappling with a full-scale brand collapse. In a single fiscal quarter, they didn't just lose money, they lost trust. And in 2025, trust is everything. Wall Street noticed. Stocks dipped sharply after the Snow White disaster became front-page news. Disney's quarterly report showed a staggering drop in consumer confidence and brand favorability, metrics the company had dominated for decades. Investor meetings turned tense. Shareholders questioned leadership, creative direction, and even the purpose of Disney's future in an era where nostalgia was no longer guaranteed profit. In response, the company initiated a corporate audit of all upcoming content, freezing nearly every non-animated theatrical release in development. Internally, executives began scrubbing the live-action division. Teams were restructured. Several top-level VPs stepped down in the weeks following the Snow White release, including key players in marketing, PR, and content strategy. Legal documents confirmed severance packages and exit clauses were activated quietly. But the shakeup was loud. The message was clear. Heads had to roll. Meanwhile, the fans who once cheered every Disney reboot weren't just walking away. They were actively turning on the brand. "This isn't my Disney" became a viral rallying cry. TikTok creators compiled hour-long exposés. Reddit threads broke down the company's decade-long descent into creative stagnation. One popular comment read, "They stopped telling stories and started chasing hashtags." It struck a nerve. That post alone was shared over 60,000 times in one weekend. The most painful part for Disney, even the people who wanted to like Snow White, the ones who gave The Little Mermaid and Mulan the benefit of the doubt, felt betrayed. Parents brought their kids and walked out mid-showing.
A series of controversies is threatening to derail the opening of Disney's latest big-budget blockbuster. I'm talking about the live-action remake of Snow White, which will be out next week.
Longtime fans canceled Disney Plus subscriptions in protest. According to a report from Variety, the company saw a measurable spike in unsubscribes directly linked to the Snow White backlash. And in the middle of it all, Rachel Zegler became the face of a disaster she could no longer control. Her name trended for weeks, but not in the way anyone hoped. She was praised and vilified at the same time, caught in a storm of blame and controversy. Attempts to defend her only made things worse. Disney tried to shield her, pushing out soft PR and curated interviews, but the narrative was already locked. She had become a symbol, fairly or not, of everything fans felt was wrong with modern Disney. But the most haunting moment came not from a headline or a viral post, but from a decision buried deep in a shareholder document. It confirmed, in black and white, that Disney was now shifting primary investment away from remakes and into original IP and streaming-first animation. Quietly, the company was abandoning the formula that had defined its last decade. No press release, no fanfare, just a line in a filing that marked the death of an era. And behind the scenes, creative teams began to whisper what fans had already figured out. Snow White didn't just bomb, it broke something sacred, something Disney might never get back. But what came next stunned even Disney's harshest critics. In the weeks following the internal pivot, Hollywood began to shift. Competing studios took note of Disney's collapse like sharks sensing blood in the water. Warner Brothers reportedly canceled 2 live-action fairy tale projects in early development. Paramount paused its animated to live-action adaptations, quietly pulling pitch decks and halting meetings. Executives across the industry weren't just reacting to a bad film, they were reacting to fear. If Disney, with its unmatched legacy and marketing firepower, could crash this hard, anyone could.
Now, fans are growing more concerned about Disney's new Snow White remake, mostly because of what the lead actress has been saying to the press. Rachel Zegler has been described as a walking PR disaster for Disney.
Industry insiders began calling it the Snow White effect. It wasn't just about money anymore, it was about audience trust. And that trust had snapped. Every studio that had built its slate around easy nostalgia was now racing to rethink its lineup. In leaked emails from a major production house, executives debated scrapping several reboots to avoid Disney-level fallout. One line read, "We can't afford a Snow White." But while the industry scrambled, Disney was unraveling quietly behind the scenes. The live-action creative department was gutted. Office spaces were cleared. Department heads were reassigned or let go. Directors who had been in talks for future remakes, like Jon Favreau and Rob Marshall, went silent. Projects that had been greenlit, funded, and already in pre-production were shelved indefinitely. Employees from those productions posted vague goodbye messages on social media, heartfelt but clearly censored. Meanwhile, Zegler was removed from all upcoming Disney promotional materials. Without saying it out loud, the company began scrubbing the film from the spotlight. Press screenings were canceled. No award campaigns, no legacy celebrations. Snow White was becoming Disney's ghost film, a project they'd pretend never existed. But the consequences weren't limited to film. Disney parks also took a hit. A planned Snow White-themed attraction was postponed, according to an official statement. Merchandise tied to the film was pulled from online stores just weeks after its release. Cast members at Disneyland and Disney World were quietly told to avoid commenting on the film while in costume. One employee, under anonymity, revealed they were instructed not to recommend Snow White to guests asking about movie-themed experiences. And yet, beneath the surface, something even more dangerous was happening. Disney's identity was fracturing. For nearly a century, the brand stood on one simple promise: timeless stories, told with heart. That promise had been eroded by committees, corporate messaging, and marketing mandates. Snow White wasn't just a bad film. It was proof that Disney had stopped listening. The creative process had been overtaken by brand managers and trend analysts. The final product felt more like a boardroom algorithm than a fairy tale, and audiences knew it. The trust that had taken generations to build had been broken in a single release. By the end of Q1, Disney's top executives gathered for what was described as a strategic reinvention summit. The focus? Rebuilding. Not just the brand, but the belief that audiences once had in it. Plans were drafted for a return to smaller, original animated features with tighter budgets and creative freedom. New guidelines were proposed to limit executive interference in storytelling. And for the first time in a decade, the phrase "magic first, message second" was written into internal creative briefs. Because Disney had finally learned the lesson.
There's more. There's always more. Let's have a listen.
I mean, you know, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story.
You can't preach at your audience if you forget to enchant them first. And as one animator put it in a now viral tweet, "We stopped dreaming." The audience noticed. As Disney began piecing together the wreckage, it became painfully clear. This wasn't just a PR disaster. This was a cultural reckoning. For years, Disney had relied on its golden vault of animated classics, believing the legacy alone could carry any remake to success. But Snow White shattered that illusion. The public had grown tired of lazy retreads wrapped in glossy visuals. They wanted stories with soul, not rebranded nostalgia fed through corporate filters. And this time, they didn't just reject a movie, they revolted against a mindset. The internal shift was swift but silent. Top-level creatives were instructed to go back to basics. Instead of billion-dollar remakes, executives demanded pitches for original, emotionally driven stories. Budgets were reduced, not out of fear, but control, to avoid bloated productions weighed down by spectacle. Animation teams, once sidelined, were quietly brought back to the table. One leaked internal memo outlined the goal. Trust the artists. Let the characters speak. Stop chasing headlines. At the same time, Disney's marketing division was completely overhauled. The studio had spent the last 5 years chasing online trends, hiring influencers to push films, and weaponizing social issues to build buzz. But Snow White proved that this strategy had a time bomb built in. When the film's story collapsed, all that visibility turned into a death sentence. Hashtags once used to promote the film were hijacked by angry fans. TikToks designed for hype became roasting grounds. Meme pages shredded every frame. The same tools that Disney used to boost its brand became a megaphone for its downfall. That won't happen again.